I want to talk about a subject pertaining to the current NBA. That subject is player empowerment. So, what do I think about the player empowerment era? So, we got to define when this era started. I would say the player empowerment era started when LeBron signed with Miami way back in the summer of, I believe it was 2010. Yep, it was 2010. Since then, we have been in this era of player empowerment, which is players making random moves to create their own super teams or stacking the deck in their favor to win. That's kind of like how I define it. In the sense, it's basically them stacking the deck in their favor to win championships, giving them the best odds of doing it. That's how I define player empowerment. I think the media defines it in a different way, that these guys are rising up against these oppressive owners, and that they're finally taking their rights into their own hands and whatnot. I think that's exaggerated to a large degree, in the sense saying that they're oppressed by these horrible owners. Granted, do I think the owners are a good group of people? Absolutely not. I'm not down with them at all. I think with all these guys, you can find corruption with all these owners. All billionaires have some corruption behind them. They're not saints or good people. But do I find these players great, good people, or have good character? No, I don't think they have it either. Both of these groups are trying to get the most power they can in their favor to make the most money they can to line up their wallets. So so for me, I'm just rooting for a good product. And in this case, I want the owners to rein in and have more control and more power, because I feel under the player empowerment era, in more ways than not, the product has been very shitty. Like, we haven't had really a good NBA product, during this era. That's what I firmly believe. I know some people will bring up the ratings and say, like, look, the ratings were great when LeBron went to the Heatles, or the Curry Warriors. The ratings were awesome. Blah 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 blah. I have to say that's just all a bunch of bullshit. They manufacture facts, I would say. For example, they'll say something like, this is the greatest rating since the 1998 finals, or the Jordan Bulls. And then you compare the numbers and you see how poor the ratings are compared to when Michael Jordan was playing in the finals. So there's a lot of exaggeration, going on when they say that garbage. They have to say it because they got to present the product as being in good hands so people don't tune out to it. They can't tell the truth. Oh, the ratings have been pretty bad since the Jordan era. So I never take that seriously, but I'll go into more detail why I don't like player empowerment. I think the first thing it does, it kills rivalries. Really, you can't tell me a rivalry in the current NBA. Can you tell me a rivalry? I would say a rivalry is when a team plays another team. I think at least, I'm going to define a number of times. We'll just say probably 3 times. At least 3 times in a span of 10 years. So I'm going to be generous in 10 years. So think about rivalry that we've had in the last 10 years. I can't think of any. I know some of you guys will bring up Cavs Warriors, but that really turned out to be a shitty rivalry after Kevin Durant joined the Warriors. There was no contest. It wasn't even close. So it wasn't entertaining. I will say this, during the 90s we had good rivalries. You had the Bulls and Knicks. They met up in the playoffs a bunch of times. That was a lot of fun, seeing Michael Jordan go up against Patrick Ewing a bunch of times in the playoffs. If we had player empowerment, we would have never seen it. We would have seen something crazy like Ewing going to Chicago, to pad his ring total, or just Karl Malone and Ewing teaming up, something ridiculous where they're in a different location. For all we know, they could be in Miami. Just we don't get those type of rivalries. We also don't get Indiana versus the Knicks. Can you imagine if player empowerment existed back then? Reggie Miller could have joined some other team. Maybe him, Ewing, and Karl Malone all go to the Lakers together, and then we have them playing in LA. How much fun would that have been? We would have missed out on those potential Pacer Knicks series, which were a lot of fun. So I think we would have been deprived of that. I look at that. I look at even the early 2000s. We had Spurs Lakers. Imagine if Tim Duncan was a softie and decided to leave the Spurs and, let's say, play for the Lakers, just or something like that. It would have been fun at all. We had Spurs Lakers, we had Spurs Suns, we had Spurs Mavs during during the 2000s. So we had good basketball. It was very competitive. Just it was a lot of fun. Like guys stayed for long periods of times with their franchises. And no, I'm not going to say like the players should be loyal to their teams. I understand that loyalty and business don't mix, so I'm not going to say that any player's a fool for leaving. Absolutely not. I'm just saying I liked how the product was because these players were able to stay with their teams for long periods of time. We got good matchups just during the playoffs where people could get excited about it. So I don't think you get these exciting matchups that often. I look at this year's playoffs, and I would say this was the first. I would say maybe this was like the second or third playoffs in a row where the teams weren't really stacked. I would say in 2020 you had the Lakers with LeBron and AD, so they were kind of like a mini super team, but not a legit one. But they formed together. The current teams that were playing these playoffs, I would say none of them were super teams. Yeah, but I would say the playoffs were dull. But I think a lot of it has to do with these teams haven't played together for a long time. A lot of them, except for the Warriors. The Warriors took advantage of it. But I'm still optimistic in the future. The games can get better if teams stay together for longer periods of time. We could see better matchups during the playoffs in the sense. So I would say just the league is starting to come back from this player empowerment stuff, but it can set it back immediately any second now. I think the other thing about player empowerment that I don't like is it makes the league really dull. It makes it boring and dull. You cannot tell me when the Warriors got Kevin Durant that the league was exciting. The league was boring as hell. You knew the Warriors were going to win every year that Kevin Durant was healthy, and they did. The first year together, they were something ridiculous like 16-1. It was not fun at all. You can't tell me that's exciting. It was dull. It sucked. It sucked ass, as they would say. Just it was a crappy product. Just that's the way I looked at it. I think some people will argue the finals got good ratings, even when Durant was there, when they were playing the Cavs. But I would say the ratings were not really good if you compare it to the 90s ratings. So they don't compare. I would also say the ratings were quote unquote high, allegedly, because people hate LeBron. That was the only reason people tuned into those finals was to see LeBron get his ass whooped. That was the only reason. Only reason people wanted to watch those games. But if it was some other random team, some run the mill team, I don't think people would have tuned in. This is my opinion. Here, the arguments I hear for player empowerment is like, well, these guys have to protect their generational wealth. What if they get hurt? So I just say this is a bullshit argument. We've already seen this is kind of like a false argument. I just look at, for example, Kevin Durant tearing his Achilles tendon in the finals right before he was a free agent. That didn't affect his free agency. It really didn't. You still had a bunch of teams that wanted to throw the max at him, knowing he would be gone for the whole entire year. So it didn't affect him in that regard. I look at Klay Thompson. He tore his ACL. I remember in those finals, and he was a free agent. The Warriors still signed him to a big contract. None of these guys are ever going to be homeless, if we're being honest. So I don't really know what people are saying by protecting generational wealth, really, quote unquote. I think that's a really stupid argument. These guys have hundreds of millions of dollars. Really, I don't really see how their generational wealth is going to be threatened when their teams want them to play and they're scared that they're going to get hurt. That to me is such a dumb argument. We're hearing from these guys. I felt Kawhi milked it during his final year with the Spurs because he just wanted to get out. That's what I believe. I don't think he was ever at risk of losing millions of dollars for another big deal. I just didn't believe it. I feel the same, with what Ben Simmons was doing with Philadelphia, forcing his way out. Just it's just a bad look. And now with Kevin Durant and Kyrie, just none of these guys' generation wealth is going to be lost. Teams are desperate. These guys could have two broken legs prior to free agency, and teams will still sign them. So as long as they're young in their primes, they're going to get max deals, even if they get one major injury. Some team will be desperate. So I just don't buy into that nonsense. To me, when they say that they're looking out for their health, it's just mainly them being selfish and deciding not to play games or trying to have holdouts with their teams. So I think that's terrible. Like I just look at the Nets with Kevin Durant and Kyrie. Both of them are healthy, but Kevin is trying to force a trade, just trying to get out of there. But I'll be respectful to Kevin Durant. I think he's going to play even though he doesn't want to be there. And Kyrie, I think he'll play too, unless there's a mandated game because of COVID. Then he's not playing. Still, in general, I think it's just terrible how guys just hold out now. Like suddenly they decide not to finish their contracts, and I think we lose all as fans because of this. Not just the fans of that team that this player is like refusing to play for, but just the fans all over the league because we miss out on good rivalries from happening. Just I think that's terrible. Just when these guys don't play out their contracts, that to me is a bunch of horse shit. To a large degree. I just think about the potential rivalries we missed out on due to player empowerment. Just I look at I look at even Kevin Durant leaving OKC. Great, I respected him leaving. I just didn't respect him going to Golden State. And no, I'm not a LeBron fan. I don't like him either, so you can't hold that against me. I didn't respect him going to Golden State because it flipped the league upside down and it made it boring. But I also thought if he had stayed with OKC for another year or two, they could have won the championship. They had more than enough talent, and he ran off like a scared, weak guy he is by going to the Warriors. We missed out on a rivalry between OKC and Golden State. That was an awesome series in 2016. That series went 7 games. Imagine if we could have had 3 or 4 more years of that. How much fun that would have been. I think a lot of people would have been entertained by that matchup, but we didn't get that. And I think that same thing is happening all across the league due to player empowerment. All it takes is a few guys to force their way out, create a super team, and bam, we don't have anything exciting to look forward to, as NBA fans as a whole. So I felt at least the last 2 years, I feel the competition has been fair. I don't count 2020 because that was the bubble and that was just some fluky stuff. But 2021, 2022, I think during those playoffs, it was at least fair. I didn't enjoy the 22 playoffs as much as I enjoyed 2021. I thought those were more entertaining, but I think overall the parity was good during the last 2 years. I just hope it stays the same. To be honest, I hope we continue to have just a good basketball where you have 7 or 8 teams that have a chance to win instead of just one team, and that's about it. It doesn't make for fun basketball. That's what I'm hoping happens. Also I hope that we can get guys to play out their contracts. I I definitely feel that players deserve to go wherever they want when they're free agents, but I do believe guys should play out their contracts. I think that also hurts from us getting good basketball and good rivalries. So I hope that happens, and I think the owners should find a way in the next CBA that these guys are forced to play out their contracts. I definitely think that needs to happen. I hope I hope it does because we can't continue to have a league where a guy like Kevin Durant just decides the moment he's unhappy, he just wants to get traded just to stack the deck in his favor, or just a Ben Simmons type of scenario. I just think this is bad for business. It's a bad look for the league. But who knows? I don't think they'll change it simply because the big marks make too much off of it, and you look at the league's collective revenue sharing model. Even the small market teams benefit when the big markets are doing well. So, but we'll see. I just think as fans, as long as this movement exists, we all lose out. So that's the way I look at it.